Open your mind. Open your mind. Open your mind.
You guys remember Total Recall? The one where you see Arnie's eyes bulging out of his head and that chick with 3 tits?
Baby, you make me wish I had 3 hands.
Well, back in 2001, an outfit called Volition Inc. put together a video game kind of like that. But according to Alan Lawrence, who joined Volition in 1996, the movie wasn't the source inspiration for the game. I've also read that he said the opposite in some other interviews, so I'll be fucked if I know which way the story goes. But before we jump into a game like Red Faction, we need to take a quick look at its origins, because it actually gives some context as to why the game plays like it does. In November of 1996, Parallax Software split ways and gave birth to 2 new studios, Volition Inc. and Outrage Entertainment. Outrage went on to make Descent 3 and Alter Echo, but was dissolved soon after that. Volition went on to create probably the best and most underappreciated space combat sim ever made with Free Space 2. Soon after this, they started working on Descent 4, which was cancelled midway through production. From this cancellation, Red Faction was born. Cobbled together from the abandoned parts of Descent 4 and pushed out into the market, it ended up selling more than 1 million copies by the end of 2002. Supposedly it was done on a tight timeline with an even tighter budget, which is pretty believable considering some of the jank that's in this game. Believe it or not, this is my first time playing through the campaign of Red Faction. I used to play a ton of deathmatch with a buddy of mine on his PS2, but I never got a chance to actually play the game. To get this working on modern hardware, you need to get your hands on Dash Faction, which is an open source patch, and it touches up the graphics and cleans up some of the bugs. But keep in mind, there's still a ton of bugs in the game. Red Faction does have a tutorial, and I did go through it, especially after the struggles I had with my first playthrough of Half-Life, but I only got so far before a bug kept me from going any further. The story goes, it's 2075 and the Altor Corporation has been bringing miners to Mars with the promises of wealth and adventure, but things aren't what they seem. The living conditions are shit, tensions are high, and there's a plague running through the colony. People are dying or disappearing, and the corporation seems to be doing nothing about it. The protagonist is Parker, and in his own words,
"A year in the Altor mine sounded like a great way to straighten myself out."
Which makes sense, because I'm pretty sure this guy is some sort of sexual predator.
Mind getting out of my face?
After the intro cutscene, it's straight into the mines at the end of a long day of work, and before you even get a chance to get your bearings, you're sucked into the poorly scripted start of the rebellion.
Hey, where do you think you're going?
Leave me alone, jerk. It's been a long day.
It's about to get a little longer, mine scum.
Just let me go, or else.
You threatening me? Yeah, well, threaten this.
You'll get your first weapon here, the control baton. This is the first and last time you'll see this thing. And you'll also get the pistol, which is pretty good for an early game weapon, but I think the crosshair is a little bit off. The secondary on the pistol is the suppressor, which can come in handy in some of the later missions. Not 5 minutes later and you'll have satchel charges and a rocket launcher. The arsenal of Red Faction is massive. It's too big even, and it suffers from one huge flaw. As you find new weapons, your old ones become obsolete, which is a real shame because you end up packing around 25 weapons, but only 3 or 4 are actually useful. The rocket launcher is an okay weapon, it's good early on, but quickly becomes outclassed by some of the other weapons. The secondary fire is a guided rocket, which can be pretty useful. The satchels are just that, and they're found by these X's on the walls, which is a bit of a hand-holding device used to introduce the environmental destruction. There are a few things that Red Faction does really well. Number 1 is the story. It's actually pretty good. I mean, I love it, but I'm also an Arnie fanboy, and I love Total Recall, so that's a bias, I'll admit. Number 2 is the engine that drives this game. One of the things that got pulled out of Descent 4 was the Geomod engine. It was built in-house by Volition, and this thing is some straight-up wizardry. It was originally called RED, or Real-Time Environment Destruction, and that's exactly what it does. You can destroy pretty much anything in this game, and I mean anything, except for the enemies. And none of the damage to the environment is pre-scripted, it's all procedurally generated. If a door won't open, just tunnel around it. I mean, you are a miner. It's an awesome experience, but it's not without its drawbacks. There's a decent chance you'll destroy the path forward, especially when you're this shitty with a rocket launcher. But let's get back to the game. You'll be contacted by a guy named Hendrix, and he's going to give you most of your direction in the game. He tells you to head to the shuttle bay to escape the mines. The first area is a series of tunnels littered with other miners and Altor security forces. The other miners are pretty much useless, but what can you really expect when they're all the same person? The Altor security forces are pretty basic. Sometimes they're packing pistols, shotguns, or even rocket launchers. Some of them just have the control baton, which is hilarious because they run around like a retarded Steve Rogers. In these tunnels, you'll find the first vehicle of the game. Coming from the guys that put Descent and Free Space together, you can be sure that there will be a few of them. This one is a mining rig, and there's no fucking way you can tell me this wasn't based off Total Recall.
Oh, that's good!
You're heading towards the barracks now, and this is where you'll find the shotgun for the first time. And this thing is not good. It's got one barrel but fires 2 shells at a time. It's pump action but also full auto with the secondary, and it reloads all 8 rounds in one smooth motion. The pump action part is okay, but it can be very inconsistent, and that's always the case in full auto. In this same area you'll find the riot shield, and it's completely useless. One of the features that was put into Red Faction that is really great is the ability to scale fences and girders. I feel like there was a lot of potential to use this feature, but it largely got forgotten about. I also found the flamethrower around here somewhere, and this thing isn't a dud like the flamethrowers in most games. This one is great fun to use, and the secondary is absolutely perfect. Once you're in the barracks, you'll also have the option to free a prisoner. It doesn't affect anything in-game, but there are plenty of little interactions like this that make the game pretty interesting, even if they don't serve a purpose. Actually, I think Red Faction is very similar to Half-Life with all the little interactive things that you can do in the environment, and especially because it's a great game but absolutely polluted with bugs. In the registration center, you'll find the assault rifle. It's burst fire, very accurate, and has this cool little ammo counter built right into the side of the rifle. This one has some staying power, and it's useful for quite a while. The secondary is full auto, and it's about the same as the shotgun's full auto. Finally, getting to the docking bay after slaughtering anything that moves, and we've missed the shuttle.
There they go. If only you'd been faster.
Who keeps shooting?
Maybe being slow isn't such a bad thing.
From here, you're going to head to the lower levels of the facility. Just be sure to watch out for the giant holes. This is the first boss fight in the game. This big security robot. It goes down fairly quickly as long as you're hitting the thing. Red Faction doesn't really have any secrets. They're more just alternate paths that you can take. Rarely do they have anything useful, but this one here has the sniper rifle, so you'd be getting this a good bit sooner than you normally would. This is a great weapon, and it also stays useful for a long time. I fell back on this one a few times even late in the game, but it does eventually get outclassed. Around this time, you'll start getting some direction directly from Eos, the leader of the Red Faction. Her first task for you is to knock out a geothermal power plant. To get to the power plant, you first have to do a little bit of platforming, which is fine because this came out before that period in the 2000s where you couldn't even jump over a popcorn kernel. Through some more ventilation shafts, fighting off some security forces until you get back into the tunnels. From here, it's a short jaunt to an airlock which takes you into the power plant. There's 5 things you need to do. You know what, the game just tells you what you need to do, so I'm going to let it do it.
There are 5 facilities to sabotage. Turbines,
Need help
water
here.
control, water reclamation, lava control, and the main control.
This part is just running around turning valves or pressing buttons. Each time you override one of the systems, some guards will swarm in. It's all pretty straightforward, and the only real quirk here is the water reclamation. You don't actually have to destroy any equipment, you can just enter and then leave again. Once you've met up with the tech and take out the rest of the facility, you're going to head down to the sub bay, and this is where I ran into an issue. See, some parts of Red Faction, you'll need explosives to get into certain areas. Well, I'm out, and the only way to lower the sub is this little button in this locked room. And the only way into that little room is to blast through the wall. So I ended up having to reload a save back at the robot fight. The sub is really well done. It handles great with the 6 degrees of freedom. The only thing I'd say is the combat is a bit lacking. It's armed with homing torpedoes, so mostly just fire and forget, while you tank torpedoes from the enemies. The underwater sections in this game are gorgeous. The lighting effects, debris in the water, and the motion effects all come together to build this really engaging environment. My only real gripe about the underwater sections is these stupid whales with this psionic attack, and they're fine when you're in the sub, but there was a point where I had to try to get by a couple, and the only weapon that works in the water is a pistol, so I was held up on that shit for a long time. After a short stretch in the sub, you're headed up to the administration building to meet up with a member of the Red Faction and kidnap a guy named Griffin. And this is where the pacing hits a fucking wall. See, it was pretty common in games of this era to have a forced stealth mission, and I don't think there was ever a good one until Modern Warfare, and even then you could go loud if you wanted to. This one is particularly bad. It's split up into 4 sections over 3 different floors. You've got the suppressed pistol, but it's not a one-shot kill weapon, even with headshots. And I don't know if you can put enough lead into a guard fast enough to kill him before he alerts everyone else in the area. You can't pick up any other weapons in this section, so you're stuck with a very limited ammo supply. Half the time you're stuck in the middle of the room like a tit while you're trying to figure out the pattern of the guards. It took me about a dozen attempts to get past this first floor. On the second floor, the first thing Hendrik says to you is to take a left and he's got a surprise for you. And what's his big surprise? You get to meet him in person. Taking a detour is exactly what a guy wants to do in one of these missions. Fucking clown shoes. The third floor is the easiest section to navigate. It's filled with Altor elite guards, but these guys definitely aren't the brightest. Blow past the secretary into Griffin's office, and it turns out this guy's on your side, but you still end up treating him like trash. From here, you'll have to lead him through the rest of the office building and into the tunnels to meet up with the Red faction. This section here isn't that hard. It took me a while to figure out how to get past this guy here. Turns out if you enter the ladies' washroom, it'll draw him away from the hall. Once you're out of the admin building, you'll grab yourself a shotgun. Thankfully, the first guard you come across has another new weapon. The submachine gun is another weapon that really doesn't make much sense. It can use both pistol and assault rifle ammo, but both mags feed from the bottom and the injection ports are in the wrong order. It's all sorts of fucked up. Functionally, it's one of the better weapons in the game. You'll also find the grenade in the same room, and these are pretty standard. Lead Griffin through the rest of the tunnels. There's quite a few enemies in this section, so it's quite a bit of fun to tear through.
Do you have to
You're in
kill
the bot repair
everyone you
shops
meet?
now, Parker.
And yes, I do. Down into the launch bay and race to the gunship while taking heavy fire. Like the sub, the gunship is another vehicle that's done right. Armed with missiles and a heavy machine gun, it's a ton of fun to use and has the same freedom of movement as the sub. Also, the sound of the machine gun spinning up and firing is the same sound used for the beam cannons in free space. Through this series of tunnels that look like a training course for the gunship, and here you get to fight off a bunch of gunships and guys with rocket launchers. This whole section is a blast, and thank Christ you don't take damage from running into anything. Once you're done mopping up the rest of the enemies, you'll head into the trash disposal facility. This is the next boss fight of the game, and it sucks. It's another giant robot, but this time you can't destroy it with weapons. You have to lead it into an incinerator. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, it's not. See, the concept is simple, but with the size of the robot, it sometimes gets stuck on the geometry in the tunnels. You end up spending more time running around trying to get the thing unstuck than doing anything useful. And when you do finally get this thing out onto the conveyor, you've got to hit a couple buttons to open the incinerator door and start up the fan to push it into the hole. These buttons also happen to be in the open, so you're just getting peppered while you're trying to kill it. You guys need to check this cutscene out.
Yeah, Parker. Great job. You can pose for pictures later. We gotta keep moving.
Shut up, Weasel. If Eos didn't want you, you'd be dead by now. I'll decide when it's time to go. Okay, let's go. Hoof it. I'm not carrying your sorry butt anymore.
Parker, Griffin, over here.
Jesus Christ. Now that you're done with your little temper tantrum, it's down through the incinerator to the science and medical labs to find a guy named Quade and a cure for the plague. This is an optional stealth section, and I didn't even attempt to go through this quietly. I may or may not have butchered everything living in this area. The labs are so well done from a design and aesthetic perspective. Everything is clean and bright, and the lighting effects are really nice. In order to get through the labs, you'll need to find a key card. You'll find it on this fella here. At this point in the game, the elite guards start showing up. They take a fair bit more punishment than the regular guards, and some of the spots took me a few attempts to get through. You'll find Quade in this room here just hanging out, and if you put a round into him, you're automatically pulled into the cutscene.
See you. I must thank you for starting this little diversion. It has made my work so much easier.
What's that mean, you half-human freak?
These troubles have given me the perfect excuse to accelerate my experiments. Who will notice a few more vanished miners in all this confusion?
To hell with orders. Die, Quade.
Congratulations, Parker. you were the first to see my nanotech shield in action. Now I must return to my work.
And the chase is on. I left this until now because it's the first time worth mentioning. Alongside your health, you're also packing an enviro suit, which kinda acts as an armor. What it really does is keep you from going all googly-eyed while you're outside the airlock. If your suit is shot and you go outside, you will suffocate and die like I did here. The designer saw this happening, so if you die, the next time you load your save, you hit the airlock, you're met with a suit suspended from nothing. Maybe this was something that was added with Dash Faction, I'm not sure. In the caves, you'll run into a new enemy called Creepers. At least that's the only name I could find for them while I was doing research for this video. They're pretty quick and can do a solid amount of damage if they can get in close enough. The shotgun does a decent job, but the best weapon for dealing with these things is the flamethrower. Just a quick shot and they're toast. As you're working your way through the tunnels chasing after K-Pack, he gives you more and more information about the missing miners and the experiments he's been running on them. Before too long, you'll come across some of the failed experiments, and they look like something straight out of Men in Black.
He looked like crap.
When I was whining about having to fight the psionic fish, this is where. There's a pretty long underwater swimming section that took me a while to get through. This section is also nicely done, working through a series of ice tunnels towards K-Pac's lab. You'll run into another mini-boss here, this acid-spitting space worm. It's a pretty easy fight, but both times I got to this point, I got crushed as the thing died. There is an option to fight a second worm if you go down this tunnel here. The tunnel will lead you to an alternate access to K-Pac's lab. The lab itself has a much more industrial feel than the previous one. You'll come across a few experiments locked up in here. This is going to sound sadistic, but I like how the scientists run around acting like they're innocent in all this and expect me not to kill them. I had some serious trouble when I got to the second floor of K-Pac's lab. The elite guards, again, take more punishment, and the shotgun is one of the only weapons I had any ammo for. The result is me dying a lot. Next is me dying a lot again, but this time it was during the fight with K-Pac. He's got his nano shield, floats around the room, shooting some purple shit at you. The energy balls are homing projectiles that will travel through walls. They do a ton of damage, so even when you keep moving, there's a good chance you'll get wrecked. Eos does come in and give you a hand, and there's a stockpile of weapons and ammo through the door that she comes through. And if she dies, it's game over. Now that you're done with K-Pac, you get to enjoy a nice long, very long drive on the surface of Mars. The ride through the canyon isn't all bad. You get to mow down a bunch of guards with the turret. The truck is by far the worst vehicle in the game. There was one in the tunnels leading up to K-Pac's lab that you could drive, and it's impressive. As you blast your way into this tunnel that's slightly too small for you to walk through, Hendricks will tell you about the newest opposition that you'll be facing.
The Mercs are led by Colonel Masako, a real nasty piece of work. They're all butchers, and she's the worst of them.
We'll get to them in a bit when they actually start showing up. The environment in this next area is also really well done. For me, this really captures the empty and desolate surface of Mars. Nothing but rock and canyons with a dust storm rolling through. They could have made the tram a little taller though. We're in the comm center now, and the whole objective here is to get to the top of the tower and send a message to Earth for backup. You'll find the precision rifle here, and this will replace almost everything else in your previous arsenal. This thing is stupid accurate and fires as fast as you can click your mouse button. Its only downfall is it's got a 20-round mag. And this is where you'll meet the mercenaries for the first time. But don't worry, they'll get much, much worse. The fights throughout this section are pretty tough, mostly because enemies are constantly spawning in. I died a few times here, but I eventually just bum rushed the control room, and it was another mad dash to get out of the building. Now that the message is out, you'll have to disable the planetary defense system, and this is where the mercenaries become a giant pain in the ass. See that flash of blue light? That's the railgun, and it is instant death. And yes, they'll shoot through walls with it. The best solution I found is to bounce around like an asshole and use the heavy machine gun to take the mercenaries out. But at the end of the day, you're at the mercy of the RNG, and it may not be so kind. The heavy machine gun is my favorite weapon in the game, just a belt-fed bullet hose. From this point on, you'll be save scumming, unless you like playing sections of a level over and over and over and over again. You'll also get to use the railgun, and it's a great weapon, but only really useful if you're catching the enemies off guard or fighting against mercenaries that don't have a railgun themselves. Also, watch out for the train. You'll eventually end up on the train, praying you don't get smashed by a rogue slug from a railgun. At this point, I was extraordinarily low on health, so there was a lot of bouncing around dying.
At the back of this building. Hurry. All you have to do is send the launch signal and destroy that part of the complex.
You're almost to the point where you can deactivate the planetary defense system. Just a few more rooms packed with mercenaries carrying railguns.
Mom said I'd come to a bad end. This one's for you, Mom.
What the fuck is this?
Override engaged. 30 seconds until launch.
After that, it's a mad dash back to the train before the place explodes. Once you've come to, Hendricks tells you that you've got 10 minutes to get to the shuttle that'll take you up to the space station. Clear out a couple small groups of enemies and you'll find yourself a tank. And this is the second worst vehicle in the game. It's got a machine gun and a mortar type cannon. My biggest complaint about this thing is the lack of a turret, so you have to turn the whole vehicle to get lined up on the enemies, which wouldn't be too bad if the areas were wide open, but there's a couple of tight canyons or enemies hiding around corners. I had to play through this section a few times to learn the enemy placement because the guys with railguns kept tearing me apart. The mercenaries are also packing a new weapon here, the fusion rocket launcher. It's insanely powerful in their hands, but I think the railgun still does more damage. I hopped out of the tank to grab it here, and I don't even know if you can shoot this thing without hurting yourself. Every time I shot a rocket, I took damage, and the mercenaries can live through a blast that lands 3 feet away from them. That reload animation is perfect though. Once you're through the airlock and into the spaceport, things get scummy yet again. This is the last push to the shuttle and you have to head through this small tunnel on this belt system, and of course there's a guy with a railgun in here. I'm not sure this motherfucker was even looking at me. I finally got through and made it to my hideout on the shuttle. So you're up here to take out another planetary defense system so that the backup you called for can get in safely. And for the most part, the space station is really well done. You're bouncing around in low gravity, fighting through rooms filled with mercenaries and drones. I fucked up here and headed straight for the reactor. Well, you only have 60 seconds to get off this thing once you start the overload. So it says, but I ran around for a while after the countdown was up. Next time around, I decided to clear the station before heading to the reactor, and the railgun comes in real handy for this. As you're working your way through the station, Hendricks and Eos are on you about the mining complex being taken over by the mercenaries. I think this was pretty well thought out because I was feeling a sense of urgency, even though I know it doesn't matter how long I take. You've got to find a switch so you can access the escape shuttle, so I spent a fair bit of time working through the station looking for the button. There's also a little side mission here, I guess, where you can destroy the targeting system for the satellites, which is completely unnecessary because you're going to take out the whole station anyway, but it's busy work, I guess. Another thing I don't really get is why the failed experiments are in the med bay, in space, away from the testing facility. Anyway, let's try this reactor thing again.
Reactor overload in 20 seconds. Reactor overload in 15 seconds. Reactor overload.
Escape pod number 2 detaching in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, detach.
It's back to the red planet, and this is by far the toughest part of the game. Everything from here on out is tight corridors or hallways with very limited cover. Not that the cover does anything anyway, seeing as half the enemies have railguns. So she's back to save Scummin yet again. The mercenaries are everywhere in this first section, and a lot of the time they have the high ground. As tough as this part is though, it's probably my favorite. The level design is gorgeous, and you never really know what you're going to run into. I did have some serious issues with game performance here though. The old toaster was just chugging along. Next up is an assault on the Merc base. A couple guys with fusion rocket launchers and a couple turrets. Too easy. Another thing that was popular in the early 2000s was the mandatory arsenal reset. I'm pretty sure I'm wanted dead or alive. Instead of getting a bullet to the back of the head, it's time for a jailbreak.
Whichever view is perfect.
I got lucky when I was fighting through the prison. I was inches from death so many times. I also had a guy from the red faction go rogue and start firing rockets at me. I guess that's what I get for filling them with lead. You get to meet Hendricks in the flesh here. He tags along with you after you shut down the power system and for the most part just gets in the way. It's all pretty short-lived though. God damn it. Yeah, Hendricks gets fucked right away here.
Here's what mercs do to traitors, Hendricks.
We're in the home stretch now. Just have to make it through a horde of gunships and mercenaries with railguns. This whole section is just rolling the dice and hoping the RNG is on your side. The railguns absolutely wrecked the gunships, so I had to replay this part so many times. It might sound like I'm complaining here, but this section was a blast. It's fast-paced, tensions are high the whole time, and I made it to the final battle with a whopping 32 hit points left on the gunship. The last fight of the game, and you're facing off against Masako. And this is kind of a dud, just a repeat of the fight with K-Pek, except this time the arena is so massive and she doesn't shoot overpowered purple shit at you. It's easy, just stay out of range and keep shooting. Once she's dead, the game's not over. Down the lift where you find Eos tied up next to a bomb.
No time to untie me. Grab the circuit analyzer in my front pocket and attach it to the bomb.
And you get to do one of these shitty little sequence puzzles. Twice. The best part is the sequence changes all the time, so even if you come back and replay it, it's going to be totally different than what it was the last time. And that's it. A great game with only a few lows, but the highs were so good. It would have been something to see Volition polish this one off before pushing it out the door, and I'm glad games like this have a dedicated community that keep them alive. This was one hell of a nostalgia trip.
Yeah, let's go with that assumption.
Hey, the antidote works.
Yeah, it seems to. Mind getting out of my face?